rock,
paper,
scissors,
shoot.
Oh,
I
okay.
did
Well,
paper too.
okay.
So
Well, what a fun way to introduce ourselves to each other. Since scissors cuts paper, I'll get Michael Mayer, Jonathan Groff. My name is Christian Borle. For anyone who might be watching this very private conversation, I just wanted to put that out there. How are you guys doing? You want to just say your own name in case I got it wrong?
Yes, I'm Michael Mayer. I'm the director of the Little Shop of Horrors that we just were working on this year,
Delightful.
which I miss terribly.
I do too.
Oh, me three. And I'm Jonathan Groff, and I played Seymour in The Little Shop of Horrors.
You were wonderful. I played Oren et al.
Yes, et al was like, I've never seen anyone play et al the way that you played et al.
It was subdued, cool. Yes.
Yeah, the subtle.
Well, a lot of what I was able to accomplish was because of the collaboration that existed between the three of us.
It was very pleasant, wasn't it? It was a good collaboration. It was fun for me, I will say, because I have collaborated with both of you in prior times. So,
you want to mention what those projects were, just for the invisible listener?
Sure. Well, Christian, I don't know if you remember this, but you were in Thoroughly Modern Millie.
That I do remember. The year was 1907. I just gleaned.
That was our first collaboration, and then we've done at least one reading between that and then when we did Smash together.
NBC Smash, yes, that's right.
And then Jonathan and I we did Spring Awakening way back when, and then we did the Jamboree at Encore's Off Center.
Yes, yes.
You and Sutton Foster.
Yes.
She's kind of the other person in this conversation.
Yes, she always
is.
It always comes back to Sutton. But actually, Sutton, you know, she was a big supporter of Spring Awakenings. I believe she was Spring Awakening. She was one of the investors, I believe.
She was. She came to see the show at the Atlantic.
I remember.
And with Christian Borle.
That's right. And the show, we realized it, and we realized as we sat there that we were witnessing an incredible collaboration between all of you, because you don't create a piece of theater like that without that type of communication. Can you talk a little bit about when you two first realized during that process that you were clicking and understanding each other? Because you were obviously all on the same page.
Me and Jonathan, specifically to the two of us?
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if we feel like it's the same time. There were two times that, like two very specific moments, right, Jonathan, that I feel like we sort of went to new levels of communication.
I can't wait to hear what your two are.
Well, mine too. I'm sure they're the same as yours. One was at the callback. When we had a work session.
Yes.
Everyone take your shirts off. Yep.
Michael, that's one of mine too.
That was one. And then the other one was deep in, I think we were well into rehearsal, possibly even in tech at some point. And I really was trying to get you to tap into your anger. Remember that?
Do you want to tell that story, Michael?
Well, you could tell it if you want.
I want to hear your version of it.
I don't remember all the details, but I remember at a certain point, and it doesn't involve Sutton, but it does involve Leah Michelle, who was a source of, a great deal of, I'd say, of intense conversation because your scenes were so complicated with her. But I remember at one point I was like, what? Because you're such, Christian, I don't know if you know this about Jonathan, but he's got a very sweet disposition. Generally, he's like a very kind and sweet kind of person. So it was, and I was just getting to know him really. And the character that he was playing is really is full of rage and righteous indignation. And we were trying to get him to tap into something there. And I was like, something's got to make you angry. What makes you angry? And he said, you do. And I think it was because I think I had been very tough with Leah on another scene. It was not an easy show to do, but I was pretty tough with her. And I think Jonathan, in a mode of really coming to her defense in a way, was genuinely pissed off at me. And so, but we got there, and suddenly the scene kind of took off in a great way. And I feel like that cemented some kind of great trust between us, because you could felt free to say what you felt.
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like collaboration in that regard there's such a level of safety that needs to be there. You create. I feel like, as I'm hearing you talk too, I feel like everything I first learned about collaboration in every sense is from you, Michael, because watching you put together the show of Spring Awakening and watching you pull the best out of every cast member, watching you pull the best out of Stephen and Duncan and Bill T. Jones, and be present for the sort of thing that happens in the middle of two creative people coming together that they couldn't possibly do by themselves. I feel like I witnessed firsthand at a young age, at 20 years old, actually, at 20 years old with you when we were developing that show. And you also created this environment where, because collaboration is also messy and there's the potential for people's feelings to get hurt. And sometimes in that heat and in that uncomfortable place, or in that, inappropriate is the wrong word, but I would just say unfiltered emotional place and direct place is where really exciting things happen. Mm-hmm. And you were pushing me, and I felt safe enough to let something out of myself. And then I remember, I don't know if you remember this part, but then the next day you came up to me the first day of rehearsal and you were like, I'm sorry if I ever, if you are angry with me for disrespecting or being hard, it's all out of the intent. They're like a family, we took care of each other, where it was like explosions, and then, but there was real trust and commitment to making something great. Like the collaboration was about the bigger thing. It was never about anybody's personal agenda, and therefore nothing was personal. It was all for the sort of greater service of the piece.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad I apologized. I'd hate to be a complete asshole. That would be
Michael, you don't strike me as someone who's a manipulator in that way. Is it all just instinct for you, or are you just riding the wave of what's happening in the rooms? That's the most pretentious thing I've said all day, and it won't be the last.
Good, though. I like it. Yeah. You know what? I do think I don't think I'm a manipulator. I certainly don't try to be, and I don't think that way. And I do try to ride the room, and I always try to make a space.
Can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
I don't feel safe.
Ride the room. Ride that room. Oh yeah.
Okay, we got off the rails, but yes. So you just kind of are work instinctively in that way.
Yes, that's correct. I do. I think about what all the pieces are going to be, and I have like some intuition about how it might work, but you never know till you're in it. And then I just try to be really available to what is actually really happening, and see how I can help guide everyone towards.
How have your relationship with actors changed over time in terms of collaboration? Because actors are funny in every sense of the word. Actors can be like just little, how do we describe actors? Like puppies sometimes, You know what I mean? And they can be petulant and emotional and insecure, but also, you know, sometimes glorious and fun and gorgeous. And so how do you cope with, and it's different for every project, obviously,
Yeah.
but over the years, the mercurial aspect of things?
I think that's actually an incredibly good question. And I think that I think I changed a lot. When I was a young director, just starting out, I felt like it was my job was to sort of sculpt every single moment and sort of and have some kind of really like specific vision for every beat of the show, and really mold and force and do anything in my power to try to get the performance where I saw it in my head or I heard it in my ear. And as I think as I've grown to understand how things work and how I work best and how to get the best out of a huge range of actors who come from different training backgrounds and have different instincts and different, you know, different instruments, I am much more inclined to see what they're bringing to the table and allowing that and allowing the information I have about them ahead of time in, obviously, and I still have an idea of how a scene should go, but I'm much more interested in seeing what's there, what they're bringing, and playing with that. So I've relaxed, I think, a lot since, but it was a long, you know, I'm old. It was a long time ago when I started doing this.
What do you feel like was the shift? Like, what made you shift? Was it a thing, or was it just over the course of time?
It was over the course of time. You start, things become less
Worth of time.
precious, you know. You know what I mean? This pressure to sort of deliver something finished, and I feel like, you know, theater is so wonderful. I mean, I just love coming to our show. You know, I love being there, even if I can't stay the whole time. Anything I see, I know something will be different and fun and surprising, because there's that freedom to play within the structure that exists. So I've just grown more and more fond of the mercurial nature of the beast.
Let's talk a little bit about our little shop process, because it was very free. I remember when we bounced around in all those different rehearsal rooms, which I think actually served the final show.
Weirdly, it did. That was so crazy. That first day, in that little room, we were all like, "What the hell are we gonna do this show?"
I just
It's
got
the
nervous.
anxiety anyway, and I get a little claustrophobic. So that meet and greet was basically like a hallway of a rehearsal room, and the carbs were flowing.
Oh my God. Tammy and her sunglasses. It was an intense day.
I would call that one of the giddiest rehearsal processes I've ever had in my life.
Oh, for sure. I think that
Very hands off. You would just the right amount of gas in terms of, like, I remember doing the dentist stuff with the chair, and I would, you know, for me, if I may, in the rehearsal room, I like to throw a lot of stuff out there, mostly just to make people laugh in the rehearsal room. And sometimes rehearsal room laughs actually become the real thing.
Right.
Most of the time they don't, and it's your job to kind of say, like, maybe not that one, maybe that one. But I remember, like, throwing 5 or 6 things into the dentist scene. And at the end of the rehearsal day, you were just like, here are 5 things that I think you should think about keeping.
Right.
But it was never like it had to be here, it had to be that, or just like a gentle guideline. It was so nice to be trusted in that way.
Well, you're very trustworthy.
That's nice.
No, I mean, when you called, I mean, I would say that this cast came together in the most, fortuitous way. Like, to have Christian Borle call and say, "Can I be your dentist?" Like, that's like a dream come true for a director. Ask anyone. I'm not alone in this. It's like, that's the greatest gift. Like, that's 99.9% of my job. And you did it for me. you know, so it was a pleasure. And I feel like with this show, one of the things, and I've talked about this a little bit, and we've all discussed it too, that there's something about the way the show was originally made and what Howard did with Alan and the spirit of this particular piece really, I think, brings out the best in everyone working on it, because it reminds us all of whatever the impulse was for us at whatever age to put on a play. And so I felt like I hadn't felt this in years, the delirium, the unfettered joy of just putting on a play. I felt like we were all 14 years old in the best sense, you know, not in the pimply, anxious, stinky, horrible teenage way, but you know what I mean.
Some of us still don't wear deodorant. It offered unto me and Jonathan one of the giddiest, most euphoric moments I've ever had on a stage ever. And it was because of what we all built together, because of the show itself, because of the West Side Theater with 270 seats, and the spirit that the audience brought into it, that it was a special, small occasion. We were on stage together. You weren't there, Michael, mercifully, but I know you heard about it, and I'm so sorry about the show report. But
I'm sorry I missed it.
I think, Jonathan, do you want to talk about just for a second? You know what I'm talking about in the flower shop. But you know this in Seymour. Because you did it. You're responsible for it.
It was this, and like you said, there was this sort of joyful giddiness throughout the whole course of the rehearsal process. There was no BS. There was no egocentric weirdness in the room. It really felt like very joyful the whole time. And we couldn't believe how joyful it kept feeling. Like when we went into the dressing room, we were like, whoa, this is like the water coming through the thing. And it was exciting. Or the creaky spiral staircase up to the stage and how small it was. And everything kept delighting us more and more.
Everyone got on board in that way.
Yes. And then Christian, I have so many questions for you too, like backlog that maybe we won't even have time to fit into this thing about like, because you were saying, you know, I threw out 5 things in the dentist scene, but actually you threw out like 500 things in every scene. At every turn, there was always like, you were just always you were just inventing at all times, which kept everybody on edge and sort of like waiting to see like the next thing that you were going to do. And then it created this dynamic between the two of us where I would just always like laugh at you, or there was like this like twinkle. I can only describe it as like a really tight rectum, for like 2.5
your upstage half smile.
Yeah. Christian would call it like my stroke face because he would start to make me laugh. And if this was the audience, I would just go like, because I would start to laugh, but I would try to only laugh with the upstage side of the face.
Very effective. They didn't notice at all.
And it was this weird balance because we were also, and Michael, I think you'll agree too, it's like, we were very serious about doing it. It wasn't just like a laugh.
Jonathan, I was telling you the story of my revelation on Spamalot when I was doing a scene with Hank Azaria and David Hyde Pierce, the Bring Out Your Dead scene. And it was, it taught me so much about comedy. They were letting the audience laugh until the audience stopped laughing. And it confused me as a young comic actor because my instinct from early on was to kind of like jump on the end of the laugh and keep the scene driving. But they would just let the audience laugh until they stopped laughing. Mm-hmm. And then the audience could hear the next line. And I told you this story. And I was like, don't be afraid to, if I may, because you were 20 when you did Spring Awakening, but now you're 24. So you've learned, but you're still green. And so I was just like, please, you know, let's experiment with letting the audience laugh themselves out. And we stood there. I did my shtick where I point at the clock and we're standing there. I'm in my ridiculous pompadour and you're standing there with your glasses and your cap and you just wouldn't go. We stood there staring at each other. They laughed and they laughed out and then you just wouldn't go. I was waiting for you to say your line and you took the notes to such an extreme that you utterly broke me. And we had a moment, and the audience was there on the same page, where I've never broken so drastically. We were laughing at each other and looking at what we were wearing and like realizing that the audience was, and it just wouldn't, I couldn't get back. I've never had that moment on stage before.
Oh my God, I'm sweating.
We got right back into it. And it was a moment that came and went.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not to get too like topical about it, but it's moments like that that make theater, is that you're all in this unique evening together. The audience is there on one side, you're here on the other. And, I know that we're all thinking about experimenting with what do we do with this?
Right.
But unless you get that juice from the audience, that metaphorical juice, please don't leave juice at the stage door.
Jonathan distributes plenty of juice.
Oh,
no, they're going to
sends it right over the.
I think my career in theater is over.
I was just going to say, for a while anyway, you're a dangerous,
Totally.
weapon of mass destruction.
Totally. Oh my God.
People in the front row who would just lift their playbills.
Jonathan said one night when he was walking downstage, they said, "Oh, here he comes." Hiding.
They were so scared that like, even I would walk to do the scene stage right with Tammy before suddenly Seymour, and they would just be like, "Oh," and we were just talking.
But you came to terms with that, and you finally just said, because you were feeling self-conscious about that for a while, right? And then you just said,
I've always spit. I've never been able to contain myself. When I eat, well, I get very wet on stage. I get very wet. I was going to describe the times of my life when I get wet, but I'll just keep.
I think we can imagine that.
I can imagine, yeah. And I get very, I salivate. I just salivate and I sweat. But at the West Side, the theater was so small that it was the first time I could see people's faces in disgust as I spit upon them. And it did make me feel really self-conscious. And then about a month and a half in, I just released it and thought, this is what's happening, you guys. But I remember that moment, and that like, what you did, and I want to talk too about our collaboration, where there was this sort of, I've never experienced it before in anything else, this sort of open dialogue between everyone about ideas, thoughts, sharing information. That feels oftentimes when you work at a level of the people in theater in New York, there's this competitive nature and there's this sort of protection. Where I've worked with people that they do their process, they come into the rehearsal room, they do their pre-planned thing, and then they leave, and the whole rehearsal process is sort of self-protective. Right. And it's not shared, and there aren't ideas exchanged. And that thing that we were going to do all these comedic scenes together, and I was open to learning as much from you as I possibly could, and you were open to sharing. And that thing that you said about let's wait until the audience stops laughing before we say the next line was like, it's something I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life. And then also created such electricity between us, because then, and I don't know if you intended this or not, it made us listen together to the audience as opposed to listen alone to the audience.
For our thing that just landed or didn't land, and that
yes,
your thing.
Yes. So then we were in conversation, the three of us, the audience and you and I, as opposed to one person thinking about coming in on their thing. It was really a group effort. All those scenes became such an exchange of energy, like a three-way exchange as opposed to a two-way exchange.
And this is going to sound like I'm joking, but the fourth person in that is Michael, and Michael's sense of taste. And I think we all had in the back of our mind what, as you handed the show over to us, Michael, as we started like doing the run, in this kind of hexapoppin atmosphere, we were, I think, as you mentioned, Jonathan, pretty focused on doing the show. that we all cared about and wanted to do. And it was because of, Michael, your sense of taste. Can you talk about, is there a moment for you in any of your like former collaborations when you realized that you had a very specific sense of taste? Who did you learn from? Who did you admire? Who did anybody else have a, you know, because taste is all obviously subjective, but
It is subjective. I also feel like every show has its own sort of metric of what is appropriate. Where, you know, where is the line that you dare not cross before you start to sort of disrespect the characters or the scene. And I think that's always just been my thinking. I think honestly, who I learned that most from, and this might be a little surprising, is Tony Kushner, from working with him from when we were in grad school together, and then acting in plays that he was directing, and then directing plays that he had written. Throughout, when I really learned the difference between the laugh that serves the scene and the characters and takes the play forward and helps propel it, and those laughs that you never recover from.
Yep.
You've disrespected the reality of it, and so that's always
the audience too. They start to just
completely. Oh yeah. There are these cheap laughs that you can get, and yeah, you can make them laugh. It doesn't take much to get an audience to laugh in a way. It's pretty easy because they're there usually to be entertained. But if it's
a little tipsy, am I right?
But you know, there's the wrong kind of laugh, and there's the laugh that is cheap, and then you pay for it later, because what happens is you stop caring. The audience stops actually investing in characters and in the scene. And so the beautiful balance, I think, that you two and the whole cast really found in Little Shop, and I'll take the credit I'll take is by just, as you say, letting you have the show and trusting you with it, and trusting that you sort of knew where those boundaries were based on the rehearsal process. But you guys I don't remember it ever really tipping over. Even that, I feel quite certain that even that performance, when you guys both broke, I would put money on it that they were still completely with you when you came back into the scene. I have no doubt about it. I have complete confidence and trust in both of you that you would wouldn't violate that.
Soon after that is, you know, Tammy comes out of the back and you abuse her, you know, and that was always, I mean, including the performance where we broke right before that, and then other performances where we didn't, that was never a joke. And that always, as directed and as performed by you, and it always sent a chill through the crowd in the most effective way.
And it needed to, because that is the moment that convinces Seymour to become a murderer. And without us really understanding that, then the rest of the show, then we're lost. We've lost it. So it's important.
I miss it.
I remember there were moments like when I would have little thank you, Michael moments, like, because it's also the tone of Little Shop too, is that just when it's funny, it's serious, and just when it's serious, it's funny. It's so disarming, where you think it's a joke and then it's quite profound, the entire message of the show even. It seems like it's all for laughs until it seems the complete opposite. And I remember like nuzzling the lid of the trash can, like just when it gets into like a potentially sappy moment, and then you had told me to do that, and then it gets a laugh, and all the kind of like, or the reverse of that, where, you know, Christian, when you would come out at the end and you've come out as all these hilarious characters, and then you come in and you kneel down on the ground and do that little speech to me that's actually kind of chilling and scary, and then you come back in and pick up the knife or the machete that's been thrown out and get it, like that sort of tightrope walk of I feel like is in the writing of the show, but was extracted in a very specific Michael way, where I would think of you every night in very specific moments.
Well, Michael, who was the movie star that you told me to look at for Patrick Martin?
Oh,
I was doing like a very like Pat Seymour, and then you were like, but there's also this version of that guy.
oh
And
my
that put it over the
God.
top.
Who was that? I remember this now.
Think about it.
I will think about it. It's right on the tip of my tongue.
He had this dry, chilling, glazed delivery.
It wasn't George Sanders. I want to say George Sanders, and it wasn't George Sanders. Fudge. Remember.
All right, we'll come back to
I
it.
do remember telling Jonathan to look at Lana Turner.
Yes.
The postman always rings twice when he starts to lie.
Yes. And that was such a surprising, I would have never thought to play it that way. Because it seems like, get into the plant, he's made the decision to kill Mr. Mishnik, but then all of a sudden it was this psychotic turn that was Lana Turner that you told me about. And I watched it and I was like, oh my God, that's so much.
Christian, was it what's his head from Laura?
I don't know.
He played Waldo Lydecker. What's his name?
No, it is lost to time, unfortunately. Oh well.
Yeah.
Whatever the essence was, you took it and played it, so it worked.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'll hear it, and when I feel like the show is still running, because I was like, and when I go and see it, but when I would go and see it, every now and then there were little things from rehearsal, Christian, that you had done that little things. Every now and then they'll come back for a performance or two, and then go away again. And I'm always like hoping that I see them. I don't want to ask for them because I don't want it to be that locked in. So it's always delightful when they little odd, little
Laundry twos.
That happened very early in the rehearsal process.
Yeah, but every now and then you'll bring that little thing back, and I'll be so tickled by that.
Yeah, what was the exit line?
Little Audrey too.
I really do forget. I feel guilty sometimes that, the rehearsal room that we created was so full of spontaneity and just choices of love. Everyone felt very free to make choices. But then at some point you do have to lock stuff in.
Yeah.
And I think some nights during the run, I would be doing my like gas shtick and just thinking about people in the dressing room. Because now that it's locked in, like 8 shows a week, sometimes it's basically going to be exactly the same as it was yesterday.
Right.
And I grapple with, like just doing my job, but also thinking about people in the dressing room, like, and there's that sound. Oh, and I wonder if he'll make that sound. Yeah.
Yep.
But
yes, I know.
That's also not to be too. That's part of the collaboration that we all agree to, is that we all just kind of like, we have to be gentle with each other in a run in that way. Of like, that's how you're going to maintain, and it's excellent. And I know that I've seen that choice 1,000 times, but we all did a good job of keeping it pretty fresh.
It felt fresh for sure. Even if it was exactly, certain things got hit exactly the same way.
Yeah.
But
not to get not to get into any kind of gossip, and certainly not to kind of tear anyone down. Can you think of, in your experience, either of you, what is the ingredient that spoils a collaboration?
Well, I've had...
If you're giving warnings or giving a word of advice to students or people who are coming up in this business, what is the thing that can sour a collaboration real fast?
I think ego, like egotism. When any of the collaborators start to feel that what they're doing is somehow more significant than the show, anything. When it's like I've did a show where there was some choreography that I felt was very much like, look at this, look at me, choreographer, that not in Little Shop at all, but in another show. And I remember thinking, God, that's wrong. We're not in the show now. We're watching you show off as a choreographer. That's just an example of something that I've seen. And when that person, the collaborator, whether it's the actor, whether it's a writer, being overly, show-offy about the writing that doesn't sound like the character suddenly. I've seen that happen before. So it's not just in the rehearsal room, but it's also, sometimes it's in the creative team as well. If there isn't like a gracious, like, oh, right, okay, and pulling back, it can be poisonous. And that's really bad. There's a selfish kind of thing that I think that it's tempting especially for stars who show up, and when the show starts to feel like a vehicle for a star, and everything is about feeding that sense of stardom, and it's that ego thing. I think that's real. That is the only thing I think actually that destroys a collaboration.
Ego.
Yeah, and it manifests in lots of different ways, but I think being late is like disgusting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not like being late for half an hour, Jonathan, being like not showing up for rehearsal. You know what I mean? Because what that means is that you're prioritizing your own personal life over everyone else. Like, show up, be prepared.
Yeah, it's not that hard to add 15, 20 minutes if you know you have to go to Pret. Remember when we could just go to Pret? But yeah. It's not that hard.
I feel like this is an intervention.
No, Jonathan, I will say this about, for anyone who might be watching this, the joke around the West Side Theater was that Jonathan would always be late for a half hour, but in your defense, you would be there. You would just be very graciously giving your time to someone who you were talking to.
Exactly.
You wouldn't excuse yourself to be like, I've got to go sign in. You would be giving of your time. It was always a very sweet reason.
Exactly. But I'm talking, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who are late to rehearsals, who don't show up, who aren't prepared, people who think that it's an expression to me of egotism, because they're prioritizing their own personal, whatever it is, their needs above the needs of the show.
The lack of preparation is, for me, one of the things that I just can never, ever get over, because you have complete and utter control over it. It's one of the only things that you have control over, is spending however much time you need to come in the next day and not be the person that people are like, okay, so I guess we're just gonna, you need to do it again,
Yeah, right.
Like, pace in your kitchen for half an hour the night before.
That's exactly right. So that's like a pet peeve that I have. And I feel like it's demoralizing to everyone, and it's disrespectful to the people who are really busting their asses and really working in good faith and with, respect for everyone else. So
I have a real bugaboo about people who take themselves very, very seriously, who don't have a sense of humor about themselves. I realize that ever kind of like a little snarky, or like talking to friends or in the dressing room, and you have that very special, like, protective bubble where you feel like you can talk about anything, and like it's usually done with love, and sometimes it gets a little catty because we're only human. But the people that I tend to kind of like get catty about are people who don't have like a sense of humor about themselves.
Right.
We all have an ego. An ego is required on some level to get ahead in this business, to know what you're doing, to feel confident, to put down away. But you also have to not take yourself that seriously. And when
do you think that? But is that like is that just a characterological thing? I mean, do you think people are just born that way?
Maybe.
Or brought up that way, or is it a defense mechanism?
I mean, you can always explain it away. Like, to me, when in my adult life, the I don't care about people's excuses for bad behavior. All I look at is the bad behavior, because everyone's got a reason for it. You know what I mean? Like, of course, you can explain it away. Like, oh, that makes sense. You're still acting like a douche.
Right. Yeah, I get it completely.
Yeah.
And it's a drag.
Jonathan, you seem like you can pretty much get along with / collaborate with anyone.
What makes you say that?
Well, you're like innate sense of like graciousness, and you're very you're comfortable in your own skin. I think you have a very great sense of like, this too shall pass. If you're stuck in a situation that you'd rather not be in, you're incredibly patient. I don't know, you're nicer than the rest of us.
Yeah, you're very nice.
Like I feel like for me, I do my best when there's somebody, like someone with vision running the room. That to me, I feel like I feel like if I believe in the material and I believe in whoever is leading the charge, then I almost like like my favorite version of collaboration is losing myself. Is like feeling completely outside of anything I could imagine on my own. But so I guess like but I feel like I'm not good in a collaboration of like, I felt so safe in the Little Shop collaboration because I felt surrounded by geniuses and working on genius material. And so I think that allows generosity to come out of myself, because I felt humbled in the room, and I felt humbled by the people in the room and humbled by the material that we were working on.
Have you, and not naming anything obviously, but what do you do when you are in a situation, let's say it's not genius material, and let's say it's not, and let's say there is no vision or that's discernible, or that is vision that you really get behind. How do you deal with that?
That to me is when it starts to, that's when it depends on the specific scenario. I don't want to throw.
Think of one, don't say what it is. Think of a scenario that you've had.
Okay.
And describe how you dealt with it.
Deep breaths. Thinking of a specific scenario with a director that had no idea what they were doing. And so the entire ship, so it goes top down, and everyone was sort of scrambling for their own, for their own life preservers. And so in that particular scenario, I journaled a lot when I would come home from work. I never would talk about, there was also things exploding all around. I think when that happens, it's like the leader is a mess, and then all of a sudden people start fighting or gossiping or explosions are happening. So I sort of just didn't contribute to the drama. I would journal when I came home, took deep breaths, and tried every day when I went to work to think of one thing that I really loved about some particular thing in whatever scene it was or whatever. I just really tried to, it was hard, but it was almost like a meditation. I just tried to sort of be on my own island, focus on the thing that I liked, and vent about it to myself in a journal when I got home. And I made it through, and then it's over. And now it's a memory. And in the moment of it, it felt like hard. It just felt hard. In the grand scheme of things, like especially now, nothing seems hard. And in the grand scheme of things, then it's just like perspective. But when you're in an artistic world, you do feel like that is your entire world. So trying to just lean into the one thing that I liked every day, and then express it when I got home and release it was how I tried to get through it.
It's like Karen said in Smash season 1, Dev, I'm in tech, you know? Oh,
You know, it was a very, very tricky world we were in. And it was new to both of us. TV was a new thing to both you and me.
we were truly insulated. So we were able to just kind of like be in love with each other and have a great time and enjoy the ride. It was such a great ride. It was a great gift you gave me. I remember that final like screen test coming out of the room with Deborah and picking a shirt and her being so sweet. We hit it off immediately.
I know. I said, do you remember what I said to you?
No, which is that?
I said, because you were doing another show.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know if you were going to be available.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew you'd be brilliant in that role. No, I knew it. And you walked in and I said, you know, you did the thing. And I said, do not break our hearts now. Because I knew Deborah loved you. I knew Teresa loved you. I already loved you. And so that was my like only fear, was that you wouldn't be able to get out of that out of the show in time.
Well, it all worked out. I loved it so much. And I will say this, you know, talking about like TV, there's something very special about theater people. We all know it. I think the world now knows it in a way. Anytime that I've kind of glanced near television stuff, mm-hmm. people who primarily do television are always blown away by the work ethic of people who work in the theater. Mm-hmm. They primarily come in prepared, and the ego is a very different situation. There's gratitude when you get to like, when someone brings you like a bowl of ragu and you're like, what?
Oh my God.
This looks amazing. And there's also lunch later. Like, so like pathetically like, I love it. And I can also have these crackers.
We're so grateful.
I know. But it's true. The people have a different type of heart and a different appreciation when things are going well. And, you know, then when things go not so well, it's like petulant but.
All right, well.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity. It's been nice to catch up.
Yeah.
It
was great to see you both so much.
I miss you too.
I know that I don't want to say anything, but I know that there are things like specific things that I can't wait to work with you guys in the future together and separately. So
agreed.
Let's talk about that in the future.
All of us together, individually, in pairs.
And isn't that the ultimate, I think, goal of good collaboration, is wanting more?
Yes.
Oh, totally.
And that's how, and that is, you know, people talk about the theater community. That is the theater community, right? It's, you have these relationships and then you add more people to them. And now, like we have a thing now, the three of us have a very strong bond that we each had individually, but now this is a little, you know, nuclear family here, and we can keep adding to it.
I love it. And thank you for that.
You know, thank you.
Thank you. God, thank you so much for that.
I love you both.
I want to get back to it. Love you.
Love you.
Stay safe.
You too.
Yeah.
Did you just say I got to get back to work?
No.
All right, I got to get back to it. You guys, this has been wonderful.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Oh.